Morning, today's Friday. Happy Black Friday if you're dumb enough to go to the mall. My proud tradition is not going to the mall. However, I stayed in Connecticut because the wind chill in Vermont today was going to be 0, which is a little chilly and counterproductive for getting anything done. And we are in Connecticut right now in the north along the state line, and wind chill probably is not a whole lot better because it is nippy out here today. A little bit of light snow too. You can't see it, but kind of comes off and on. You get like a little mini snow squall coming through. So we're going to try to do some mapping today and see how far we get into that. But it is damn chilly out today, so glad I brought a coat or I wouldn't be out here long at all. With the wind though, if you can hear that, there's a lot of hold on. A lot of new deadfall down and trees. So when I say in other videos that you have a lot of deadfall because of the wind, today's a good day for that. I haven't seen any in real time yet, and I will have to keep an eye on that. But there is a lot of new stuff down. The one over there is definitely new, and the one behind me is as well. I think the two to my left are as well. Anyway, let's get moving. Get done what we're going to get done today, given the chilly wind, the wind temperature, and the potential Widowmaker threat. And we'll see what we can get done and take things from there. I will also be out tomorrow, given the long weekend, though. So there's that. And we'll get more done then, and hopefully have better conditions because today's colder and windier than I thought it was going to be. But enough bitching about that. Let's get moving. We're by the pond. Because of the holiday, I really haven't had a chance to check into any kind of Bigfoot community nonsense that's not already there and had commentary. So today's probably just going to be a look at all the damn deadfall and wander around as far in as I feel safe going, because it gets thicker in, and the more thick it gets, the more complicated navigation gets. And between this week and last week, there's a whole lot more deadfall, which means it's been windier than shit out here, which is usually when that happens. Yeah, just walking in, there's a lot of new stuff, by which I mean deadfall. And to the wishful thinkers out there, no, Bigfoot did not do it. The wind did. And I find it funny now. I got to the point of getting out of the car, and I was wondering if the coat was going to be necessary, because to those who don't know, Connecticut has probably 3 different temperate zones for the dinky little size of the state it's in. It is rather, and they down where I live, it was a little bit chill, a little bit more forgiving. You also have more clutter in the suburbs than you do here because of the nature, just buildings and whatnot, but it opens up in here quite a bit, and so you feel the wind more, and that could be a whole lot of it. But yeah, there's a lot of, it doesn't look like more, but it is. There's a lot of little stuff. I'm usually able to walk through here without zigzagging as much. There's a lot of little stuff that's cluttering up the area. If you call that little, if that came down on you, that would be a bad day. Probably wouldn't kill you, but it would hurt. This little spear point thing there is interesting and definitely not something that was there. All of this stuff is new. That may not be new. I think it is, though. This might just be a conditions of the day assessment. Just because what I had planned to do is going to potentially be impacted by the wind. That is definitely new. You can tell by the lighter color of the wood there. That came down probably within the week. And as far as other things that have gone on, the neighborhood rabid raccoon is probably dead, largely because he had rabies, and that's usually how that ends up for the animal, unfortunately. But where some animals become weirdly friendly, this one was downright nasty. So maybe it's better that he is gone. Hope everybody had a good holiday. We should touch on that. It is Thanksgiving, or was Thanksgiving. Our family deviated from the model last night by having lasagna over turkey. Still a good meal, though. Hope everybody else had a good holiday. I'm kind of making my way into the more open area. We'll see. If it's more open, I may just say F it and try to make my way to where I was going to go. What my plan had been is to go sort of expand a little bit deeper than I did last week into that little meadow area in the middle, and then kind of cross trek into an area on the other side, just so I can overland all the way through. And then tomorrow there's a stretch of trail on the other side that begins over there. I don't know if you can see the snow. I think a little bit of light snow coming down. That winds its way through to the other side over here, and then ends up winding somewhere potentially on the other side of the state line over there, which would map out the entirety of the lower tier of this area. And have me move on to the next phase of the mapping project if there is no activity. That being said, the commentary I have on that, in past years, when it's nasty cold up in Vermont and like up north, these are the conditions where if it's a little milder down here, you wouldn't know that today. But I was walking in my neighborhood the other day and it was 61 degrees, so there are patches of more mild weather. And in that case, that is the potential doorway for migration south into these areas. Usually right around this time of year, so it's a good day to keep conditions. And the other, normally I say that when you have birds, and I've already seen a few today, that's a sign, I can hear them too, that that's a sign that they're not around. I'm also going to allow for the potential notion that because they're not in the neighborhood all the time, if there is a southern population of them, they are more migratory, in my opinion, just because of the nature of the area. And the local wildlife may not be as used to them. I mean, there have been, today in the immediate area, I do know that I haven't seen them yet, but there is a hunter in the area, so I'm also kind of keeping alert for that. And if you go to the other side, over there where you have the other trailhead about 1.5 miles from here, there's at least a hunter or maybe two in there as well. So I'm not totally alone out here today, despite the windy conditions. But you're also getting to what I call the desperation part of the deer season, where the that trophy buck isn't going to get himself, so people start getting more active. They start running out of time, feeling the clock. Partially the reason for not being in Vermont today, because I had thought about it, is the wind. I mean, the wind chill was going to be crazy cold up there, but also the they have snow in there, and I do want to get in there once or twice before they close all the gates and make it that much harder. But conditions this time of year, you just kind of have to keep one eye on the weather report and kind of gauge it, which can be frustrating. But that way over there, the lighter colored wood, is new coming down. This stuff has all been here though. This is all stuff that's been around. So kind of slowly making my way over that way where it gets a little thicker. But again, you also have hunters about, so my fleece underneath the coat is orange, but it's also colder than I expected. Okay, now you got snow coming down. Not to any consequence, but enough. Welcome to late November. And it is what it is, I suppose. But I am going to take a slight segment break, cover a little ground, and assess my levels of ambition for the day today. Just given the weather being a little bit more cantankerous than I thought. We'll be back in a bit. Side of the stream now, and wind so far is a little less pronounced in here. The snow, I don't know if you can see it, is starting to just kind of speckle the ground a little bit. I don't know how long it's going to stay or what the staying power will be, but it is. There's a little bit anyway. So we're gonna make our way in a bit. I don't think I'm gonna go all the way to the area we were in yesterday. We're gonna kind of do a kind of like a follow-up more so today. Tomorrow might be better conditions for that, and then we will, of course, judge that at the time that we were there. But mainly just because I forgot to look, see what the real feel of the weather is today, because with a wind chill, it's not in the 30s. It's if I was in just a fleece, I'd be freezing my ass off right now. The initial area right by the, hear the prickling, that's the snow. Kind of like half sleet. At least in the initial area down here, you don't see as much deadfall. But that's primed to come down. Part of me wants to knock it down, but to those who've ever watched Fail Army on YouTube, there's like so many things where people are trying to bring down trees themselves and clearly have no freaking clue how to point it in the right direction, and then have comical mishaps almost kill them. And that would be me in this situation. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to know when to leave stuff alone. So that way goes to the wetland that way, that way goes to the wetland that way. And yeah. Some interesting notching on that tree right there. Out of curiosity. Okay, he's more solid than he looks. He was already pointed and given away, though. All right, we're going to take a segment break while I assess the day's conditions more. I'll be back. Okay, due to windy conditions and such, and just a lot of widowmakery concerns, I'm going to do a multi-part long weekend kind of video thing, I think, and focus most of the effort tomorrow. Partially due to having plans later tonight, and partially conditions are not totally ideal. I checked the wind chill for the day. It's only going to it's going to drop into the low 20s, and I didn't plan on that degree of cold today, which is my own fault, but we'll be back tomorrow a little bit better prepared, perhaps, and take things from there. Anyway, so we're going to leave this one here as kind of a to be continued, and we'll do that, and we'll be back tomorrow, and hopefully the wind won't be quite so crazy. So until then, we are back. It's a day later. We're starting out of the pond again. I was hoping the wind would be a little better. It's about the same. Got a little more ice and some blown around snow on the pond this morning. One thing I did do differently today is I did dress a little bit more for the cold. I didn't realize how chilly it was going to be yesterday, so I had the coat, but today gloves, hat, a little more prepared for the chilly conditions, and I brought a backup camera because with cold, battery drain, and the fact this camera has used up, I think this is new today too, battery drain and the camera's ability to use up the SD card, which it's done more than once, and we're doing a multiple day outing today. In the second part, I brought a secondary camera in case I need to switch over. I don't know if it has a full battery today, but it does have, under normal conditions, a much better battery life than the other one does. This one's good for about 90 minutes to 2 hours. 90 minutes is probably the average. The other one on higher video settings can go as much as like 6 hours on a full charge. So if I needed an extra hour or so, in theory, that should cover the demand. Either I'm coming in at a new angle or this is new as well. Kind of a weird rant today, but one because it was made by a guy out of Vermont. I find kind of amusing because we are still technically in Thanksgiving weekend. People kind of this is kind of sort of kind of political, but people who want to do the whole historical revisionism thing. I got into it I saw an argument in a local Vermont Facebook group the other day, on Thanksgiving night, and you have this guy coming in to guilt trip us all and remind us that it's all about genocide and we killed off the Indians. And while it is true the white man was not the best neighbor, most of the damage done that they want to call genocide didn't happen during the whole 19th century Manifest Destiny push. The damage had already been done in the Columbus era when Europeans showed up the first time and brought with them little things called measles and the common cold and smallpox and things that the natives didn't have a lot of immunity to. And if there was a genocide, the perpetrators were effectively disease. And that is how science works. to a certain ignoramus that was in that thread. The other thing I found comical, constant references to my people and this and that, you stole our land and all that. And the person got pressed to come clean on how much Native American they actually are. And the answer turned out to be about 3% Cree. And the rest was French and Scandinavian and basically a Euromut that has a little bit of Indian blood along for the ride as well. My family can claim that with even less. We have probably one eyedropper of Pequot blood in an otherwise Northern European gene pool, genetically speaking. And does that make me someone who is going to, in the case of just being sarcastic, have a new windfall from Indian casino welfare payments? That money's not coming because I'm not one of them by any share of blood that would entitle me to anything like that. That is just the genetic reality of my genetic makeup. So when this idiot is trying to do disingenuous white guilting, as a white person, mind you, it's stupid. Well, it's stupid. %3 does not make you a native. It makes you, if anything, if you're doing it intentionally, it makes you somebody who is misappropriating culture and a massive hypocrite. And I find this when you press people for actual information. You actually come to find out how delusionally idiotic they can be. It's sad. That has nothing to do with the intended reason why we're here today. As I alluded yesterday, we are having conditions kind of shape up for potential migratory activity out here, but that is not yet proven to be the case, but we're going to try to make a bit of a mapping run today. The wind is not so crazy, but also it wasn't actually that bad once we got inside over there. It was more the matter that I hadn't really dressed for the conditions, thinking because the day before had been warmer, it wasn't going to be that bad. And ended up being pretty cold. So today we came a little bit more prepared, and we'll take things from there. Yeah, 3%, that doesn't cut it. I mean, granted, you got more than I do, but it's interesting because years ago we went to a powwow in Connecticut, which would either be Pequot or Narragansett, and there were a lot of white guys doing Indian stuff. Not that you didn't have legitimate Native Americans. You had the controversial leader of one of the branches of the Pequot tribe, who at the time had a standoff going with the state government over cigarette sales on the reservation. But they never stormed the place, so I guess they got away with it too. But suffice it to say, for the purpose of my rant, it wasn't really that hard to kind of tell the difference between who was and who wasn't. If you have a mix, I get that. But when you're just like a straight up white guy, it's like, what is your actual percentile? You can be like this douchebag that's got 3%, because it's the fact that you identify and you're proud of that part is that's fine, but when you're trying to like guilt people and you're part of that same white gene pool, dude, you're being a hypocrite, and it's just kind of a embarrassing thing to do, I would think. Anyway, let's take a brief segment break, cover some ground, and get back to where we sort of left off, and we'll take things from there. We'll be back in a few minutes. Other side of the stream at this point. I'm not going to point out for the sake of respecting the guy's position. There's a new Hunter's tree stand out here that, as far as I know, wasn't here last week. So that's somebody new to the neighborhood. Either came in early this morning or he's not here up in the tree in the higher levels of wind, which is understandable. But as I said, I'll respect his property and the fact that it's not something for me to out per se. Lighting is completely different today. It's all sunny, which is why it's not as cold maybe. For clarity, I'm listening because there's another car at the trailhead, so there are hikers. It's a Subaru, so I think they're probably hikers more than hunters, but I keep thinking I hear voices over there. Could be something else completely, but I will prefer solitude anyway. But we're going to kind of go in the same direction we did last week and expand that area and our knowledge of the nature of the overlanding in there. Once we get up the hill a little ways, somewhere along here there's or we could probably hook around the wall right there as soon as I find a suitable way. I'm not really my agenda was more purpose driven yesterday, but like I said, I was unprepared for the chilly nature of things, so playing a little catch up today. That's all right though. The season is young. We're going to walk into the area from behind the wall, since you can walk around it before it begins right here. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like walking around in here is a bigger pain in the ass. Could be the wind blew down a lot of minor bits of deadfall and shit, but I don't know. I'm going to take the easy way. Go around the tree and then up. So I get spiked in the head with a little freaking stick. All right. But yeah, like I said, that rant has nothing to do with anything Bigfoot related, but every now and then you'll run into somebody that tries to do that, and like, that is not what you are at that percentile to a level where you get to be a moral authority on history any more than anyone else. By the same token, I have enough Irish in me to remind anyone who's English, because I have blood in that direction too, that there was a time when the King of England was trying to depopulate Ireland and take the land. And a lot of Irish folks were basically sold into indentured servitude, if not outright slavery, in the name of the crown. There's a reason why the Irish and the English and their history isn't always stellar. And that would be why. But if you listen to a English academic, they try to whitewash it. And unfortunately, a lot of times the truth of history like that is a bit uglier. And it doesn't take away from the narrative of the fate of black African slaves, but it does kind of flesh out the greater situation by saying, yes, this happened to you and it was wrong, but you weren't alone. And they went about it differently because you were dealing with people that had come up in the European system and you had to be a lot more sneaky about it. But in the end, it's effectively what it was. You also had a weird situation during the French Indian War. I guess we're doing history class for a bit. Where you had a weird kind of quasi-slave trade going with white English New England colonists by way of the Mohawk, the Hurons, and the French from Quebec. The whole war itself was effectively a proxy war between England and France. New England was the English side and the greater Quebec area was the French side. And the other aspect of that was religion. The French representing the Catholics, English representing Anglican, largely Anglican Protestants. I just heard an odd noise. And wasn't quite the same as a straight up slave trade, but what was going on, where the New Englanders would take POWs in the form of French soldiers. The Native Americans and the French saw it differently, and they saw it differently among themselves too. The typical Indian village was maybe 100, 200 people, and if they lost 20, 30 people in a battle, that's a lot of your population. So they were grabbing men, women, and children, basically just to replenish the ranks of the tribe. But before they were formally accepted into the tribe, they were basically a little better than slaves for a while. Or they were sold to the French as indentured servants for, I think the typical period was like 7 years. And during that time, the whole point was hearts and minds for the Catholic Church. You got to come back to the Pope. And this is a piece of history that, at least in the history class I had, was largely overshadowed until you start reading more fleshed out historical books on things like this, and realize that the Indians and the white folk weren't really as separated in a lot of cases. Your town, the next one over, was a bunch of converted Native Americans who were taken in by the Catholics or the Anglicans. And a lot of the Indian villages already had a padre there. Till you got further out, there was another tribe too, but a lot of them were, the ones grabbing settlers for captives were basically, I think, Mohawk and the Huron. And they'd marched them up into Canada. This was a whole thing where the French Canadians for a while were, I don't know if you can call it a straight up slave trade, but it was pretty damn close to one. And they were doing this to New Englanders, notably folks in the upper parts of New Hampshire. And interesting stuff. So, but again, kind of like just to move on to other things as I get further in here, the whole argument that like slavery is uniquely a black thing, every now and then people need to be reminded. Ancient Greece, way back when, had slaves. Rome had slaves. Their slaves were the people that lost wars to them. The Vikings took slaves out of white Europeans. So did the Tsar. The word Slav literally means, guess what? Asians have enslaved Asians. Indians have enslaved Indians. Muslims and Christians have enslaved each other. And the unfortunate reality for the whole black slavery argument is the majority of the people enslaved in Africa were not enslaved by white people. They were bought by white people, but they were enslaved by other more powerful African tribes. That was a daily reality of African tribal life. Probably similar to the Native American mindset on that, where we just lost 50 guys. We need to replenish them with 50 more. So women and children, and breed them into the tribe, kind of a thing. And it may or may not fit your narrative, but that is a bit of the reality of it. Anyway, I'm going to take another segment break and cover some ground. Trying to decide if I want to parallel along here where it gets thick or go back down into the stuff down there. Or I could do both. Anyway, regardless, I will start paralleling this way and then decide if I want to see how far I can get that way without running into thick stuff you get lost in. Minus the fact that you got the wetland right there, but we will be back shortly. So the momentary plan is to parallel along the top here. As long as terrain allows and you're not as quite under threat from potential widowmakers and the like. Also, if you had somebody up here in the way of our quarry observing from cover at the high ground, they might have signs of activity up here. Never hurts to look. And let's see if we can find anything like that. The wetland's right down there, so we also have a visual marker for a while. We know that the other little meadow thing is down there, so we have some reference points to make our way through. Something was digging here. What's this? Got in pretty far too. Telltale snow from yesterday too. Not a lot. I would hesitate to even call it a dusting really, but more like that late November tap on the shoulder telling you it's never that far away though. But if we're going to be mapping through the winter, it's good for tracking to see what's here and the like. So we'll go at least that far to see what we can see, and then you're on the top of where that little, I'm just going to call it a meadow, wedge meadow. There's a similar one in Vermont that was actually a likely nesting site for a pair of them a couple years back, but all indications are they've moved out of the area since for whatever reason. Maybe they're migratory up there too. I'm going to kind of wind through there if that allows me to. we'll take things from there. Okay. If I'm right, the meadow's down there, and this drops into stuff. I'm going to go to the edge of this. I don't know if it's a full-on precipice or not, but if I remember right, I was down here once before, not last year, but in relatively recent times, and it gets kind of thick in there. But let's refresh my memory and see what we're actually dealing with, because this immediate area is a little more open. But because it looks like it gets thicker in there, but yeah, I guess with lack of any really good squatchy gossip that I've heard in the last week, it would probably just be the holiday just kind of overshadowed the hoaxers group's nonsense. But I'm going to take another segment break where I can kind of assess if I go down that way, or I'll probably kind of base here for a second and kind of get my bearings versus the meadow that way, and then see where the backside of I don't think I've ever actually traced the backside of the wetland all the way to fruition. So that might be something for today. But we'll be back in a bit, and we'll see where we are. So as expected, that gets real steep and real thick, so we're gonna stay up on the high ground. We go over this way. It stays level, maybe gives you a better angle eventually to go down in there, but that wasn't the idea for the day. Let's just map that a little bit further, that big log right there, and then we can see how much further this allows easy transit. Versus going up, because there's kind of like a Y that goes over that way. We can go a little bit this way first, though. Mainly because I'm trying to stick to a strategy of hugging known landmarks so I have a backtrackable way back out. At least until snow becomes more relevant, because then you can just follow your tracks back out. Yeah, I'm going to go up on the higher part of the Y. Because if you look down there, way in there, you can see the backside of the wetland. So we're still in relatively known territory. Relatively. We're going to go take a little bit of the higher ground now. A rather big clump of whatever that is. And see what we can see there. through here. Just something to say to see if you're paying attention. What's going on, man? Anyway, what do we have? We're going to go that way. If I can find a... I guess we just step over this log down here and kind of angle down that way a little bit, but I suspect we're kind of still on the outer fringes of that meadow, up on the hill over it. Kind of just looking at this overall area, because it does get kind of thick in here, I notice. And Jesus Christ! Fucking Laurel. We go this way. I take segment break. I'll be back in a bit. I just got a warning on the card, so we'll see if this is going to work. If you look way through there, we are over the meadow. It's down there. We're kind of doing a deeper parallel of the upper level today. Some rocky stuff in here, and it levels out where down the hill gets, there's kind of a thicker patch. I thought I'd check out the rocky part, and it kind of keeps going like this. It's a word bassy kind of sound coming from that, seemingly that direction, but it almost makes you sound like there's a vehicle over there, but there's no road over there. If you go in this direction, you're going to probably cover a good 6+ miles until you hit a rural route in Massachusetts that's way the hell over that way. Anyway, oh, it's a plane. Never mind, dummy. I should have known that. Yeah, this gets kind of thick, and then this is a good landmark. We're going to... Yeah, so you got the wetland over there. You're kind of like on the plateau over the meadow up here. And then you can kind of take a long... We're back, obviously, with a different camera. The other one... I don't know if it didn't like the cold or something. It started doing weird things and shutting off. So I got to go with plan B. That's why I brought the other camera. Normally it'll tell me it had... that the SD card was full, but it didn't say that. It just said check SD card. So hopefully it didn't die on me. I have a spare one at home, but that doesn't salvage the shooting I had today, so just for relevance, where I came out, the new tree stand somewhere in there. I'm not going to go looking for it. It's not that important. But basically what we did today is angle up that way into the what I'm going to name the plateau over the wetland. Kind of like a plateau and a hill system that goes between that and a little wedge meadow in between, as opposed to going down into a dip over that way and coming out by the wetland that you could more easily access from the Wilderness Road trailhead, which is, I don't know, it's got to be like 1.5 miles that way. The area here is big, but like not insurmountable big, not like Vermont big, where if you get turned around, not quite send the helicopters, but you might want to plan on spending the night if you have no idea what direction to go in. Whereas in here, from personal experience, you're probably looking at a couple of hours until you, unless you're severely injured or something where your mobility is adversely affected, you are probably, even if you get thoroughly turned around, you're probably only going to be lost for a couple hours in a real worst case scenario. If you're injured, depending on the level of injury, because I did in my own Lost episode get scraped up a bit, I was still able to walk out and not die. I got away with a little bit of scrapes and scratches and shit, but that was about it. Yeah, your extreme corner of the wetlands right there. And all that really happened in the interim time between my camera giving up on me and other, some deer pellets there, had some moose pellets up on the hill, was I kind of just made my way gradually down the hill back to where we are now. And once I come back to the point where I hop the stream, we'll gradually start making our way out. A couple of interesting, I'll label them odd sounds in there's the ATV trail. Kind of like a runway that leads you back to the stream where I cross most often. A couple of odd, so I'll call them odd sounds, nothing unearthly odd, but just a little bit odd for the neighborhood. But that can be something, that could be anything from just something you don't recognize immediately to a species of bird that you may not have heard before. Weirdest thing in here so far has been the stacked pine cones that are up on the hill. Probably some weird forager person, but why you would do that and then just leave them there, because you do have a potential use of drying them out and using them in a wood stove, but if that's not why they're doing that, then I have no idea what their purpose for that was. Anyway, for now, we're going to take a segment break as soon as I remember where the camera off switch for this is, and we'll come back once we're on the other side and all that. This is, I think, is about, we're going to wrap this up. So we made our way back. We're not far from the way out, and as always, this is again a part of a mapping, kind of an ongoing mapping effort of the areas that are way the hell back in there and mapping all the overland routes, with the main intent being to know the terrain better if we do get activity this year, and where there's some likely hidey holes in places to look a little bit more education. In the meantime, the wind seems to have calmed down for a bit. Like, subscribe, leave commentary in the form that you see fit, and we will catch you the next time, and that's where we're going to drop this one off. So until then, we'll see you. Bye.